We would like to begin our meeting by recognizing the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples of Canada as traditional stewards of the land. This municipality is located within the boundary of Treaty 18 region of 1818, which is the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and Wyandot peoples. Okay, looking at the agenda, everyone has a copy. We have an agenda in front of you, or with you, I guess, and Sabrina has added something in, it'll be under page 4, I guess, under H2. We'll call it the Workplace Safety Plan. We'll come to that in due course.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Has everyone read the agenda? Any additions or omissions? Not additions to that agenda? Hearing none, would someone care to move the adoption of this or approval of this agenda?
I move.
I second.
All in favor? Okay, well, are we raising hands today?
That makes sense, I think.
Okay, I can also hear you as well. Okay, that's carried. Does anyone have any pecuniary interest in this whole meeting of the library board? Hearing none, we'll move on. There are 7 reports listed there that we would like to get them received by this board. Does someone care to make that motion to receive these items 1 to 7?
I do, Morris. Joanne?
Thank you, Joanne. A seconder?
Lori.
Lori, thank you very much. Anyone against? All in favor? Anyone against? Thank you, carried. All right, moving on to item D, the minutes of our previous meeting, which was September the, where did I put it?
17th.
Thank you, 17th, yes. Are there any errors or omissions? I made a little note, Sabrina, on page 3, the word under F1, that word should be draft. The end of that paragraph, the final draft, not drift.
Yeah.
I like to pick these things up. Anyhow, moving on to page 4, the next page, under H2. H2, keep going. There we go. Keep down H2 a little bit. There we go. Yeah, it says there 9:30 a.m. till 2 p.m. Shouldn't that be 12?
It was 12, yes.
12 noon?
It was 12
Oh,
p.m.
did I miss something?
Nope,
Okay,
it was 12
not a
p.m.
problem. Any other?
It should say 12.
Good. Good thing we got that right. Anything else? Errors or omissions? Hearing none, I'd like to hear a motion that we for adoption.
I'll move
of those
that.
minutes.
Morris.
Those minutes are circulated and amended. Is that right?
As amended, yeah.
Thank you. And a seconder?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jesse. All in favor? Assume no one against. Okay. All right. A couple of items which are arising from these minutes. I'll just ask Sabrina to update us there. Our military history, is there something you wanted to say on that?
Our military history, we did have the meeting, actually it was just 2 days before the big event. So there was a link that was provided in the meeting where we did sort of a preview, and then this is actually the live event link as well, in case anybody was interested. We just put it in for information.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Is that it? Anything then on the budget update, Sabrina?
The budget, just to let you know that the budget meetings will be starting on December 2nd at this point. I do not know when the library is going to be scheduled. They haven't released the full events timeline, but when I have that, I'll let you know.
Is this something, that would be a committee of the whole meeting, wouldn't it?
It would be committee of the whole. It would be, at this point, I believe it's going to be 3 days, one on the 2nd and then 2 the following week.
Yeah.
They did spend more time last year, so I think it'll be a little bit more streamlined this time around. And again, I'm not sure when we'll be fitting in to the schedule, but it will still be a Zoom meeting, which will be then for those who are actually speaking, and then a Teams meeting for those that are speaking, and then broadcast on the town's live stream feed.
You know, do you anticipate any, not problems, that's not the right word, but any long discussions on that particular budget?
I don't, given that we went for a 0 increase, and it is sort of a, if we can say business as usual in the time of COVID, it's sort of a business as usual budget based on the types of things we're doing in 20, assuming that we'll be in very similar situations in 21. No major increases, so I can't anticipate there's going to be a lot of discussion on the library's budget this time.
Does anyone have any questions of Sabrina about this subject of the budget? My goodness, we're moving pretty fast today. All righty, moving on to item E. Are there any communications with any deputations, pardon me?
There are no deputations, and nobody has asked for public input.
Thank you. Okay. Now, we do have some correspondence, which I'd like you to talk about, but bear in mind, my question is going to be, does this joint announcement have any real, I shouldn't say real, but have any significance for this board?
There's a few things, yes, Mr. Chair, yes, there is. So the Ontario Library Service North and the Southern Ontario Library Service SOLs are being merged into one single OLS, Ontario Library Service. They are moving their location, and that will have a home base in Sudbury. Currently, they're in Sudbury and in Toronto. Most of their people do end up working from home even before the pandemic, with some desk sharing, job sharing in the office. But over the past year, it's been obviously a switch to work at home for most organizations. So this is something that has come out of, I think, ministry funding and really trying to look at how to streamline. So this was one of the answers that they put forward, and it is scheduled to take place on April 1st. So as an OLS, I don't think there's going to be a tremendous amount of shift for how our services are provided. I do sit on a number of provincial committees and have been working on how things will be happening on our end, and also sat on a panel to give some feedback on that piece. So the first one really is just the announcement so that you're aware of how our primary service provider is changing. I will move to the second one, which actually does have an impact for you. And this is to let you know that their board obviously will be impacted. Instead of having 2 boards, there's now 1 board as of April. So what they've done is both boards are going to be continuing until the end of April. They're then going to be having sort of an inaugural board that will be selected from those groups to be able to get things off and running. And then there is going to be elections as they're moving forward for members. So as we start to look at the various districts across the province, that does mean that there's an opportunity for a member of our board, should they be interested in the coming year, to put their name forward to sit as one of those board members for the region. So that's the only reason why I put it forward is, in the event that this board feels at some point that you might be interested in participating on the board that provides the service provision to all public libraries in Ontario.
That's an interesting concept, but with location in Sudbury, That's a fair hike to Sudbury in the even summertime.
I would assume that for the coming years, we're probably all looking at virtual meetings. At least for 21, we'll all be looking at virtual meetings. They
Yeah,
do
yeah.
provide travel and those types of things for it. So, and you know, meetings are not, they're not monthly like meetings are for the actual libraries. So more information can be provided if anybody is interested, and certainly as they start rolling closer to those points and they start releasing more information, I'll bring that to the board.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else got questions for Sabrina on this?
I have a question.
correspondence? Yes, Lori.
Do you know how the assemblies and the trustee councils relate to each other? Do the assemblies replace the trustee councils?
I'm going to say that I don't know, but I'm going to assume that all of the trustee councils will sunset at the end of the souls period, because the trustee councils are actually souls. So the North wasn't doing the same kind of thing at this point. So I think that as it becomes one organization, we're going to be looking a lot more at the holistic nature of the province and not as much as the South doing one thing, the North doing a different thing. So I'll be able to bring more information when they announce a bit more on where those are, but I would assume that our trustee region, if it doesn't change itself, there'll be new regions added when we start looking at the North.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Sabrina, on that. Could you perhaps, we'll move on to the action plan for 2021?
Certainly. So do you want to receive just as information? Yes.
Oh, yeah, hang on. Copy that, yeah. Yes, we should receive it first. Would someone care to move that we receive as information this item entitled Action Plan 2021?
Joanne moves.
Seconder?
Rob,
Thank you, Rob and Joanne. All in favor? Hearing nobody or seeing nobody except Jesse. I'm sorry, I can only see 3 people, so
Okay.
well, we'll learn as we go along. Thank you very much. It's approved. I meant, Sabrina, if you can bring up the action plan itself. Yeah, thank you. When I read the agenda and so forth, and I look at these things, I make a note of the questions or any questions that I might have on it. But before I speak, is there anyone else have any questions on this action plan now? Or suggestions or what? Yes, is that Lori?
It's Lori. I actually have a suggestion for an addition that I think came out of communications, but I didn't see it show up on here. And it was to initiate consultation process for the new strategic plan. And I was thinking that might fit under C4.
I'm sorry, would you say that again, Lori?
So under C4, C4.3, initiate consultation process for the new strategic plan. And the timing would be, I'm thinking May, which would then correspond with the joint policy review, which is covering mission, vision, values, and mandate. And that's scheduled for May.
Well, Laura, you're good in these things. So anyone else got anything that they might want to add or comment on Laurie's suggestion?
Seems like a sensible suggestion.
Joanne?
Certainly.
Certainly what?
Certainly, I agree. It's just a little bit beyond me.
Oh, well, you'll learn. Rob, what about you? I've never heard from you.
I didn't really have too much. I just, under C4.2, the social value report, I just was a little unclear on what that is.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Sorry, Rob, we were still back in Laurie's thought.
Oh,
there,
I'm sorry. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay, not a
I
problem.
had no issues at all with that. I think it's a great idea.
Well, Lori, are you asking, you don't need a board approval for that sort of thing, do we?
No, I just think when you approve the action plan, it would be as amended with that in it.
Sabrina, that okay?
That's right. I have it written down. Thank you.
Oh, good. Thank you very much. Anyone else got questions or whatever on this action plan for 2021? I just have a small question. Where it shows the lead party being the CEO, that's obvious. Where it says board, I'm not sure we have one there, but not any particular item, but who initiates the action in that thing? It could sit forever like that as the board if nobody takes responsibility for it. I know this leads into a little future subject, but who do you think would take the initiation?
If it is board as a whole, usually it's something that we put onto our agenda and it comes up at the meeting, and then that is usually how we kick off the discussions, and if there's any delegating of authority to do something, it happens at that point.
Thank you. I thought that's what it was, but I just wanted you to say it that way. That's
I have one question.
yes, certainly.
When it says, for example, schedule reps to OLBA boot camp, that's still in Toronto, correct?
So the OLBA boot camp for
2020.
21 is going to be online. I can't answer what will happen for 22 at this point. It may be online. It may be in Toronto, depending on where we are
Oh, yes.
at the planning season for that.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
So
anything
if
else?
I may,
Yeah,
there's
go
a
ahead.
few places, Mr. Chair, that have red under the lead party, and one of them is in front of us on the screen now. So what we had talked about is possibly deferring the vote on this until after the organizational capacity and bylaws and governance committee's report, so that we can further discuss it. But there is a recommendation by that committee to not appoint committee members for 2020 and instead move forward with these actions being full board work that would happen during board meetings,
Good point.
given the pandemic conditions.
Yeah.
So
But you
I have the items in red, so it's very easy when we do come back to this to make our decision that it'll either be board with the OCBLG or simply board, and that would be through all of them. I've highlighted them so we know, are we, depending on what the decision is of the board on committee appointments for 2021, will depend what the wording is under lead party.
Okay, so Sabrina, if you wouldn't mind, just make a little note, bring that, remind me or whatever at the appropriate time. So we move on from this action plan of 2021. We can move on and leave that in abeyance for a little while.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, if I could just, the question I had about under C42, the
Oh, yeah,
social
okay.
value
Sorry,
report,
Rob.
that's okay.
Yep, so the ROI is return on investment, which is a very economic view of library services. You know, if you put in $1, how much do you get back from
Yeah,
that
that I
same
understand,
dollar?
yeah.
The social value report is a sort of a twist on an economic and looking at what type of social infrastructure and social improvement does it bring to a community. So what is the value? What are the values that are improved in your community based on that? So that was something that we had intended to do this year, and ultimately have opted not to do the full report simply because it's a very difficult piece to compare anything during our pandemic year. But hoping that next year will be either a little bit better, or at least we'll be comparing 2 pandemic years that would have, you know, sort of an apples to apples comparison.
And if I could have a follow-up then, so something like the our military history or our military heritage presentation at the Legion, for example, as I said to you at the site, I thought that was terrific community connection for us. So something like that would be measured in this report, or?
It would, yes.
Okay, so great. That's what I was hoping it was. Thank you.
And with that, then through you, Mr. Chair, with that, we then can not only look at the event, but look at what type of artifacts do we get and information do we get, what type of new members to the museum and input do we get, what type of play and people who become more invested in what the museum has to offer, how much time is spent by new members in. So all of those pieces sort of, you take your events and start to sort of bubble them out to see where are some of those impacts that show what the dollars that were spent on one event, really how it impacts our community. And then through that, then that was where the library participates to support the town by doing the Remembrance Day Services. So all of these things you can tie back to say, you know, one simple act of a new collection, what does that have to do as a social value for our community?
Good. Anything else before we move on? I'm going to bypass F2 because Sabrina touched on that. We'll come back to that in due course. The Q3 finance report. Let me get my copy here.
So our cover page is here with our general information. We are working in an altered budget, as we have reported since the end of our first quarter of March due to the pandemic. We know that we've lost much of our own source funding of revenue of fines we have done away with for the period of at least 2020 and 2021. We had already removed children's fines. And this is something that we'll be looking at doing as a more holistic moving forward with fines. But right now, if materials are late, we're not charging a fine to somebody simply because they don't feel it's safe to come out or because they're quarantining. So we're trying to really work with our community on that. We've already discussed that we had a number of unplanned health and safety expenses, whether it be the PPE or bringing in new plexiglass, and even the HR end of it, that we've had to increase our staffing to be able to have the multiple stations. So those have been already addressed over the year. And again, we've also talked about the altered budget to make sure that we aren't over in the end. So although we have had a number of new expenses and we've also had a loss of revenue, we're working to make sure that we don't have an overage on our budget. We won't have savings, but we certainly won't have overages. There are some things that we will probably be working with the town to roll over. A number of our capital projects are just very behind schedule. And that is, you know, no fault of anyone's. It just seems that vendors just can't keep up right now with the types of things that are happening. So some of our furniture purchases are behind schedule and things like that. So we'll work with the town to make sure those get rolled over from the 2020 budget into the 21 budget, and we can continue forward with those. Outside of that, we've had a number of grants, although the pandemic is, you know, has been an issue on many fronts. When it came to our youth funding, it was quite successful. The government increased the funding from a 65 to an 85%, and then recently they've moved from 85 to 100% for us. So we've had a number of co-op students, interns, and youth students that are working with us that are, you know, full funds coming in with very little, if any, expenses on our library and museum. So that has been great. And you can see right on the report that, you know, most of these are $5,000 or more. And then the last grant from Young Canada Works is a little over $34,000. So very successful year for student work. And it has really helped with the pandemic to have those extra people in the building as we're, you know, if somebody has a cold, they can't come in. So we have a number of people who are regularly out sick with, you know, any congestion that happens in a typical November. Normally you would come in and work through your day, and under the new pandemic protocols, you're required to stay out until you're symptom free. So a simple cold might put you out for 4 days, and staffing has been an issue trying to keep buildings open. So these extra students are very helpful for that. Beyond that, our general variance is here as well, letting you know some of these things that we'll definitely be needing to roll over portions of, and some of those losses that we had. And then outside of that, I have the actual sheet if anybody has questions.
Let me just come back to what you're saying, first of all. Let me ask this, going back to Sabrina's verbal overview of what she's put in her report, does anyone have any questions on that part of it, any part of it?
If I could just have one quick question. Are we going to be looking for any funding from the governments to try and offset some of the costs? Or have you heard of anything? There is some money out there, and we're hearing that a lot of it isn't getting sent out or isn't getting spent, and so maybe we should take advantage of it if we can find a way. So if there's anything that you think you can take advantage of, please, I know that you will give it a try.
We are working with the town to see, since our payroll is done through the town, what qualifications there are. Most of the wages were not something that we qualified for because the majority of our funding does come from council. So as a result, we didn't qualify for those, and that would mean that council would have to qualify. And if council was qualifying, they were including us in that qualification. So any opportunities for wages, the town has been working through. We did receive one small pot that is being worked out right now for the museum. That was a museum specific in COVID extra expenses, so that will be put in. And there is a Trillium that is open right now, but although we qualify, the types of things they want you to do are not things that we needed. So they're trying to give you funds to create a pandemic plan, to create a pandemic safety plan, to be trained on health and safety matters. And those are things that we did very early on. So it wasn't something that, although we qualify for the grant, it's not something that was needed for us and would be beneficial. But we do keep investigating.
And on that subject, I think, Sabrina, you should receive a big congratulations, because I'm sure all those grants we've been receiving is a result of your work. You're finding them and applying for them.
Thank you.
I mean, nobody else. I mean, not the town, and perhaps not your staff, but you. Isn't that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Congratulations. Thank you. Now, with that nice words, let's look at the variation report. The September 30th expense and revenue summary. I just have a couple of questions that really confuse me on this thing. On the expenses side, if I may, well, there's a minor item there. Why are we overspending on personnel training and travel? This is the first one. Can you, I'm not asking for a detailed answer, just a.
That is actually where health and safety falls. So we had $250 earmarked for health and safety for the year for Ellie Shore, and $150 earmarked for CHD. And really that is purchasing of the Green Book, which is our health and safety required purchase that we have to make according to the Act. And then Band-Aids and, you know, updating your first aid kit. Obviously, everything from PPE has gone into there, so it is well blown. And we will be saving and shaving areas of the budget elsewhere so that we do not have an overage at the end.
Okay, all right. The other one is the, what are financial expenses? I only look at the summary of both the Ellie Shore and the
So our financial expenses would be our banking fees monthly, our ATM, or I'm sorry, not ATM, our point of sale system, which we have one at CHD and one at Ellie Shore, and then any other fees associated with investments or anything like that. It's mostly though the monthly bank account and the monthly point of sale system.
Why would that be over budget?
They've changed course on pricing after we purchased or after we create our budget. So that's part of the problem, is that our budget is created usually in August or September, and often being a fiscal, they don't actually turn around and give you what their new prices are until March beginning. So by the time we get notice, we're well into the budget and there's nothing we can change.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions of Sabrina on this particular document? Okay, thank you very much. Is that the end of our financial report?
That
Sabrina?
is.
Thank you. Put that away. Okay, now I can relax for a moment here. Who shall I turn the chair over to first?
Our first will be organizational capacity.
Thank you.
Which is
Lori?
Laura.
No vibrant spaces, okay. Great,
No.
so you have.
Vibrant spaces, no. That should have been Joanne, but there's no meeting, nothing to report.
Okay,
Correct.
okay, so the first item from this committee is the board evaluation. And you will have received the report in the package. And I wondered if we might just take a look at it from the perspective of what directions for change or training these responses suggest. So if we go question by question, then basically that will be my question to you. Is, do you see anything here that suggests something that we need to do differently or some training that we might need? So the first question, these groups of questions, the labels somehow got lost. So this section is around how well has the board done its job? And I noticed a couple things that I think were slightly below, say, the average for the section. And that was question 5 and 6. It talks about stakeholders and our relationship with them. And so my only comment around that is that that's something that was in the plan this year, but kind of got hijacked and has been by COVID. And it does reappear in our plan for next year. And then the other question was around number 10. And there was a comment where someone asked, do we need to, I wonder if we could spend some time understanding the political relationships. So I just wanted to maybe open that up for a bit of discussion to see whether people think that we should be spending a bit of time on that at a board meeting or in one, well, it would be a board meeting. Rob?
Yes, I think it would be worth understanding because it's not always easy even for me because, and I had this discussion with the Integrity Commissioner a couple of weeks ago, is as soon as I leave this table and go to the council table, I have to put on a different hat and take on a different role. So it's not an easy situation in going from committees or boards to council. So if it's difficult for me to understand, I can imagine what it's like for anyone else, because I have been sitting around these things for 40 years. So I think it would be good, and I'm not sure, maybe Sabrina has, or you have thought about how we might do that. I'm not sure what the best idea or the best way to handle that is, but I do think we need to do it. I think it would be very helpful to all the board members.
May I ask a question to Rob, Laurie?
Go ahead.
To do what?
To understand the political process and how the board might impact decision making at the council table.
Now, that leaves me still a little wondering. Do you not think that the board because it operates more or less autonomously, we don't have to know how the council does all the
Okay.
things they do.
I'm only going by the results of the survey that we have here,
Yeah, I understand.
which shows that at least some of the people think that there is some room to do that. And I'm just giving my thoughts that that it might be a good idea to do it if people feel like they don't understand it all. So I don't know. I'm just going by what the response people gave, and more than 2/3, in fact, more than 80% thought that there was a good reason to on number 10, and looking at a couple of the others, 5 and 6, that there is a need to understand this a little better.
I don't actually have any thoughts on how that might be achieved. I don't know whether, Sabrina, you have any thoughts on that?
I think that we have, you know, the sometimes to the agree to the strongly agree. Really, the whole response pool was there. So I think that it's something that we should look as part of our 2021 training, and the committee or the board, whichever is going to be in place for 2021 work like that. I think that's a big piece on what we can look at what our training would be.
If I may again, I'd like someone to define for me what is meant by the words political process. What does that really mean in our situation as a board? What does that mean? What does it mean to you, Jesse? Do you mind my asking?
Means our relationship with council.
Okay. Joanne, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, my thought was that Sabrina is our go-to of relationships, and she steadily and readily informs us of how things work. And occasionally, when called upon or on his own, Rob will also give us indicators. That satisfies my needs, and actually I had never given it deep thought until we got the survey question, if that's clear at all.
Well, if I may again, Sabrina as a conduit between the board as such and council, I agree with that because of technicalities, etc. But that is not the political process. The first thing that springs to mind when I see the words "the political process," my question would be: does the town dictate what we must put in our budget, for instance? That's political process.
If I may, Morris, I think for me, what number 10 has to do with us specifically as a public library, because this is a non-for-profit evaluation that we are using, which we have cleaned some pieces up for us specific. But I think that public libraries and councils in Ontario have a very distinct and different relationship. So the positive of that is exactly what you're saying. The council does actually appoint the library board, who then autonomously does make decisions for that type of library service. But the negative of that is that we are not typically at the table, both at the senior administration level and at the board committee level, to be able to be involved with a lot of the decision making. So often by time we're coming to make a deputation to council, it's very late in the discussion. Similarly, we saw with the moving forward on the construction plans, the architectural design. We moved forward as a board with the previous council, and then when the new council came in, we weren't in the right place with that council. So I think that this one very much speaks for me about understanding that library boards are separate and distinct, and that we use those positives, but that we have to find regularly ways to be at the table other than just making a deputation. Because when you're making a deputation, in my eyes, is when you're then there with your hand out, and it's often too late in the process. I know, council will see people coming for a grants and donation, for example. And by that point, the budget's already been set, so it's too late. So what we need to do is find, through number 10, through training, through discussion, and mostly through planning, how do we get the needs of the library, the needs of our museum, the needs of our GLAM in front of council in a way that fit directly into their large thinking process, so that we're not an afterthought. And we've seen this recently with the leisure study. So the leisure study was put out even though we were asked to hold off on plans, to wait for the leisure plan study to be completed so we could see where library needs were to fit in for the larger master plan. But then when the leisure plan study went out, nowhere in there did it talk about library or museum. So those are the types of things that I think number 10 is talking to. How do we still maintain the Public Library Act of being, yes, separate and distinct, but understanding that there is one community and one tax base, and we have to be working together and at the table at the same time, not after the fact.
Jesse, you had
Jesse?
your hand up?
Sorry.
Yes. Apropos of Morris's comment, he articulated that his first thought when he read this came down to a question of independence on the part of the library board from the council. And well, the fact of the matter is that we do operate independently of the council. We are also almost completely beholden to council from a financial standpoint. And I think that the political process to which we are speaking at the moment, and of which we must be cognizant, is how does the board function within the parameters of the spending limitations imposed by the council and the budgetary problems that council has to face. Rob is a person who can give us insights into that, and that's part of his role as a member of the library board. I agree with what Sabrina had to say, that we really have to try to be ahead of the game in terms of trying to understand what the needs are of council and how the needs of the board will fit within their financial pressures. Council is under pressure from many different directions in terms of money. And we are only one of those pressures. We have to try to have our pressure, if that's the right word to use, close to the top while maintaining our independence. And it's a tricky business. I think I'm not sure that anybody has a clear answer as to how the board should best function with the council, accepting by way of having knowledge of where the council is going and what it wants and how it views the board. So I think that's where Rob has to come in, because he's the conduit between the council and the board.
Rob?
Thank you, and that is the point. And if you remember back to, I think back in the spring, we had talked about setting up meetings with the mayor and the CAO and CEO and chair of the library board. COVID and health issues sidelined all of that, but I think that's really what what I took from this is more about liaison. Because being autonomous is good, except that sometimes you fall out of everybody's purview, if you will. So we need that liaison, and we need to make it strong. And Sabrina does her best, but we need some sort of mechanism where we make it, quarterly meetings or something like that, to bring the two together at the top levels, so that we have a chance to argue for what we're looking for, and to be aware of what council's looking for before we hear about it. So it's more a matter of liaison and being ahead of the game. And I think that was what I was aiming for when I talked about having those meetings back last spring. And I still think that is what we need. So if that's what this question is really trying to get at, then I can understand that what we're really looking for is a liaison that puts us more into council's, not in the rearview mirror, but right in front of them.
Sorry?
Morris?
Yes. After hearing Rob speak, the word that springs to my mind when I see again the political process, the word springs to my mind is lobbying. Are you suggesting that is lobbying? We should lobby? Get into lobbying council, Rob?
Yeah. If you want to call it that, I would say it's more making sure that council understands the needs of the library board and the museum. And, it's not going to take anything away from your autonomy to sit down with them and make sure they understand, and make sure that we understand what they're looking for.
Well,
Because
I
that's
hear
what
you.
happened. That's what happened with the plan for the expansion, was that the incoming council didn't understand what that was all about.
And I don't think councils would approve budgets unless they understood what library boards are there for, what libraries are there for.
Well, yeah,
It's not
I
$1 million.
agree. I agree, and I'm not sure why you're taking that attitude, but my point is that if we aren't talking to them, they aren't going to hear us, and vice versa.
But
So
as
we
Sabrina said-
can be autonomous, but we also have to be talking to them.
But as Sabrina said, we have talked to them, but we've been too late. Lobbying would let us talk to them ahead of time.
Right. Liaison or lobbying, call it what you will, but that's what I take it to be.
Under our current strategic plan and the 2021, we have an item, it says under communications 2.5, hold quarterly meetings with the town of the Blue Mountains, and it's assigned chair and CEO. And I know we ended up not doing that this year because of COVID and everybody being overtaken by that wave. But I think that's probably the place to start. And I think, Rob, that echoes what you were saying. We had expanded it a bit in our discussion in the spring to be chair and vice chair and mayor and deputy mayor, which I think is fine as well, whichever route works best. But just to meet, really, over coffee, a little bit more casually, just to get a sense of the priorities of council and the priorities of the library, and have a better understanding early in the game. So there aren't necessarily decisions coming out of any of those meetings. It's a matter of getting to know each other better, spending time talking about the directions and where the library can mesh in with where town is going, and answer any questions the town might have about the role the library can play. So we're doing that at the governance level, and you say kind of getting ahead of the game. So we can be talking about, this year, what plans, or let me put it this way, if we've been talking to them in that way a year ago, and knowing that the leisure facility study was coming up, to make sure that library was even included as examples in that. Because I think that problem represents somehow this gap, and the fact that we've not been able to create an ongoing more casual dialogue with, senior people on council.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. That's really a major faux pas, is that we were left out of that when it first came along. So we have to avoid that. And the way we avoid that is by making sure we're there at the table.
Okay. So if I can just conclude, I'm not sure that, okay, it's two possibilities. One is that we feel that by already having in our plan the idea of quarterly meetings with senior people, that we kind of have it covered. The other thing is we may want to add something in our plan about expanding our understanding of the political process and how to affect decision-making at council. And do we think there's a training element there? Yes, Jesse.
What do you think about the idea of arranging some sort of an open meeting with all members of council and all members of the library board to exchange ideas as to the role which each has to play vis-a-vis the other?
Well,
I think that would be a great idea. I also think that quarterly meeting idea may take care of number 10 for us. We may gain an understanding or develop the political process as we need to develop it that will suit our situation here. But I also like Jesse's idea. I think that would be a great idea. And even to do that on an annual basis would be good.
And if I may, Laurie,
yes.
yeah, good idea, Jesse. If we were to take the years like, forget the COVID thing. If we had sat down in January of 2020, January of this year, with the council en masse, etc., and had this discussion, what year would be able to? It would be a whole year before we could affect what we're trying to do. Do you see what I'm driving at? Because the budget's sort of set, and I'm not circling everything around the budget, but because there probably are other things. But we are planning a year ahead, and yet you want to sit down and talk to them. What are you talking about, this year or next year?
What I want to talk to them about is, here are what our priorities are on a scale of most and least. Here's what we're looking forward to over the next 12 to 18 months. We want you guys to take that into consideration when you're thinking about our budgetary needs.
And don't they get that information when they get our action plan for 2021?
Well, one thing I've learned over many years, and that is there's nothing like personal contact.
Oh, I agree.
And as for timing, I think maybe January isn't necessarily the best time. Maybe mid-year,
Yeah.
June or something would be the best time. Sabrina might have better.
I agree.
Yeah.
Just an idea, but I think that a personal contact between the board and council can only be productive.
Okay. What I've just jotted down is something we might add to the action plan is to hold an open meeting between council and library board to discuss priorities over the next 18 months to 2 years. And that would be a board effort in June.
Well, why 18? Why not 12 to 24?
That would work too. I just thought I heard 18 when you spoke.
Well, I said 12 to 18 months, but
Oh, 12 to 18? Okay. Okay, I misheard. So 12 to 18 months. Okay. And in June. Is that any further comments or I see Joanne, yes.
Lori, and from you to Rob, as I recall, June was really crazy busy with all meetings before council closed down for the summer. Is this really a good time to try to jam this meeting in?
I think that might be different this year. Last year was because of COVID and trying to get a lot of things in place before summer. And also the schedule they were trying to do for the budget. I think it'll be different this year. And there really is no month now when we aren't busy. So, you know, here it is, 2021 budget. I just got it delivered to me. So we're already at work on that. But I think from Jesse's point of view about when is the best time to talk, I think Morris is right. Talking about them in January about something we're going to do next January is a bad idea. Waiting too far into the fall, the budget's already coming into shape. So I think June would be about the right time. And you know, they're capable of handling all that. But I think that would be just about the right time. And they're planning on a 2, 3, 4 year horizon anyway. So we're going to be talking about those longer term things anyway. And Sabrina can probably tell you more about that. But I haven't looked. I think probably in this budget, most of them are looking ahead to 19. I'm 100 years behind, to 2024.
And Laura, you think that getting that into the action plan would satisfy the item number 10 on the survey, the political process?
Yes,
Oh,
I think
that
that's I think that's a good start. There may also be an option under 5 and 6, the ones about key stakeholders, is that when we do that work, we also consider whether we understand the political process of decision-making at council level when we talk about that. But yes, so what I would like to do is move an addition to the action plan 2021 that we hold an open meeting between, actually, I'm not sure what open actually means there. So maybe it's hold a meeting between council and the board to discuss priorities over the next 12 to 18 months.
Not include the major stakeholders in there, the community people, the people in the town? Would you not include them in the meeting as well?
Well, okay, let's discuss that. I think
If it's a council meeting, and there are more than, if there's a quorum, then it has to be public.
A public
Okay.
is, no, I don't mean public in that sense, Rob. I'm thinking public meeting in where the stakeholders have input.
Yeah, it could be a public meeting where we invite the public to take part.
And it was
we
not
have
a council
those all.
meeting per se. It was a
Okay.
joint meeting.
Okay, a joint meeting, but a public meeting where the public can comment. Sure.
What's the need of a public meeting?
A public meeting, all meetings are open to the public, but a public meeting, we have them fairly regularly, is where the public are invited to send comments, either written or they're given a certain amount of time to speak if they wish, for us to hear their points of view, evidence, facts, whatever you want to.
Rob, don't members
Yeah.
of the council, don't members of your council meet privately, informally
No,
from time to time?
no, we're not allowed to do that. We cannot discuss anything that would involve spending money or use of staff time informally.
Well, even if you want to sit down and have a cup of coffee with one of the other counselors, not to discuss money, not to discuss staff, but to discuss, where do you think we should be a year from today? That's something which is not permitted?
That would be fine. That we could do, but we cannot sit as a council or sit with more than a quorum and discuss anything. that would be against the code of conduct and against municipal act.
Okay.
Can I ask
There-
a question of you, Rob? So I think Jesse, was trying to get at the fact that we'd like to have more of a relaxed,
Informality.
informal discussion where nobody's committing to anything. It's more of an information sharing.
Right.
And is that, now the difference is that this is a full council, which means they end up having quorum, and that has restrictions on it. I think
Yeah.
that's what Rob was saying.
That's the problem. We have to be very careful. Even we have a task force working on broadband, which doesn't include a quorum. There are minutes taken of the meetings, but that can be done on an ad hoc basis, but it can't go on and on. I can check with the clerk and with Sabrina on whether there's a way to do this, but we have not found one. The act is pretty clear about what the requirements are for any time council gets together, and this board, come to think of it.
And Laurie, if I may, would you not still consider having members of the community sit in on that informal coffee clutch?
Coffee clutch. Well, let me open that. I was
Well-
actually starting to rewrite the motion a little bit just to say hold an informal meeting between council and board. And that, of course, be subject, Rob, to what you discover about restrictions. And then Morris, on top of that, you're saying, should we open that to the public?
Yes.
So I'd like to hear other people's thoughts on that.
If I may, Lori,
Yes.
I think we're talking about 3 different meetings.
Oh,
So
no.
the first meeting that I have heard is already in our action plan, and that would be to have these meetings between the chair, vice chair, and myself with the mayor, deputy mayor, and CAO. Those are our informal meetings where we're just trying to get the temperature of what council is looking to do in their coming years, what we see as a path forward for our library and our GLAM. And that is where that sort of discussion happens. The second meeting that I've heard is the one with the proposed resolution of holding a meeting between council and board. That would be full board, full council, and open to the public. Not the third type of meeting that I've heard, which is an actual community meeting where they're there to give feedback to council. Now, of course, that second meeting would be a council or a committee of the whole type meeting where the public can always make a deputation on the topics. They can always do public input, but it would still be more of us sitting with council and starting the conversation about where we see our service needs merging with the town's plans and making sure we're all on the same page. If we choose, I would say, for our action plan, having those 2 in there, the resolution that you put forward, knowing that it's open to the public, but it's not a community meeting. It's not about community input. It's only what would typically be in a council agenda. And our informal meetings, which is the group of 3 with council's group of 3, which is not quorum. And if we do progress far enough in 2021 that a community meeting would be needed, those are things that don't have to be on the action plan to achieve. We've just gotten there and we keep moving forward. So I think that we have 3 different types of meetings that we can't merge them. They're 3 legally identified and described according to the Municipal Act, how we can do these. One is an actual meeting, one is a council meeting, and one would be sort of a public information session.
So let's try and summarize. Then the motion I was proposing, which had hold an informal meeting between council and board, ... that would automatically be open to the public. So we don't need to add any specific wording around that. So I will go back to the motion.
And I would recommend that informal just be removed from that? Because in the end, it still has to be a formal council meeting, and it would be a formal board meeting, just so that there is no confusion on what we mean by informal.
Yeah, it's basically Section 3 of the Municipal Act describes everything we need to know, and it's pretty clear on a meeting is any time a quorum of members is present and members discuss or otherwise deal with any matter in a way that materially advances the business or decision making of the council, local board, or committee. And then there are further definitions given there, but it's very, we haven't really found a way to get away with having an informal meeting where more than 3 people are present.
Okay.
Laurie, may I suggest?
Yes, Morris.
May I suggest that you go with the motion you have if you wish. Get it on the floor, get it approved right now, and then essentially that's tabling the discussion until a later date. We're not accomplishing anything here right now,
Right, so that's my
other
next
than getting
step.
a motion on the floor.
Yeah, so my next step is moving that we hold a meeting between council and the board to discuss priorities over the next 12 to 18 months. And the time frame for that in the action plan would be June. So that's a motion to add this to the action plan. And I'd be looking for a seconder for that.
Second.
Jesse? Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye, yes.
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 Okay, thank you. That's carried. Okay, now let me regroup here. Back to the board evaluation. Under question 2, which is how well has the board conducted itself? The only thing that really jumped out to me in this section was the question number 1, as board members, we are aware of what is expected of us. And we didn't have a lot of strong agreement on that. And I was just wondering if there was anything more we needed to do to help us understand what we think we should be doing. I see Morris's mouth is open.
I'm hesitating to say anything.
Well, my take on this was actually fairly positive, so I'm not sure. I would have to hear what, if other people had some issues or questions. But I felt that generally we're fairly well prepared.
Yes. Fair enough. Yeah. And hearing no big interest in talking about this, then is there anything else under question 2 that jumped out to anybody that they want to raise?
Nope.
Question 3 was about my performance as an individual board member. And I didn't see anything here that really jumped out at me as something that we needed to address as a group, unless someone else saw something.
Well, obviously the comment under Q6 is mine. And that is that it did arise from the discussion with Integrity Commissioner, but not just dealing with this board, but with other committees that I'm on, because it does make it difficult sometimes when you're at a committee meeting and it sounds like a great idea, and then you get to council and have to look at it from the broader perspective, and well, maybe that isn't going to work so well. So that's always being pulled in those 2 directions. But I can't serve as a kind of a I can serve as a liaison, but not as a, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't be the disciple, I guess, to to preach on behalf of the library board, although I can certainly support things when I feel that they need supporting.
Right, fair enough. Question 4 was about feedback to the chair. And I know, by the way, everybody, I did do a kind of a quick look at what the average response was in each of these areas. And I have to tell you that the feedback to the chair had the highest average at 4.76. The rest of the sections were around 4.5, except of course feedback to the CEO was at 4.72. So the stars in this evaluation were the chair and the CEO.
Not surprising at all.
Not at all, no. So really for the last 2 questions, the feedback to the chair or feedback to the CEO, just wanted to open it up to see if anybody had anything else they wanted to add, or if Morris or Sabrina wanted to comment on anything they saw there.
Well, if I may, Laurie, I think the advent of the, what do you call them, streamed meetings, meetings streamed live to the public, sort of makes you hesitate to say all you might want to say.
Yes, fair enough. Anything, any conclusion you want to draw from that, or just leave it at that?
Wow,
Okay, we'll move on then. So I think we're just leaving it at that. I mean, it's a true enough statement. And I have to say that one of the questions in the evaluation is, are we having fun at meetings? And when you're streamed online, you tend to be a little more serious and always on business. So it hasn't been as much fun, but we're still doing our work. Sabrina, anything you wanted to address?
I think that the biggest thing from this year really has been that pivot to doing this from face-to-face, in a room, working together, trying to combat the issues that we need to work on, moving that onto an online format. It's really easy to lose what you're working towards. And I think that the individual committee members and the board as a whole has really worked well to pivot into uncharted territory of governance. So I definitely congratulate all of the members. I know we're all Zoomed out and team meetinged out, and you have to put more than 100% in to be able to get out what you need from these types of meetings. So thank you to all of the board members.
Thank you. Anything more to, oh, I'm sorry, there was one other thing I wanted to comment under the board's relationship with the CEO. Under question number 5, there was, I wondered if this is about the amount of information, kinds of information, and level of detail. And is there something we want to discuss about that kinds of information or level of detail that we ask of the CEO and receive from her in the reports?
If I may, Laurie?
Yes.
You have to remember that our job is not to do, but to make sure it is done. That's a vernacular way of saying it. But the communication really, yeah, and you would know this, it stems from what Sabrina thinks that should be done, and she comes to us for approval. She does that by, for instance, preparing items for the agenda, which goes to the chair, to me, and I look it over and I either add something. I've never deleted anything yet, but it's an upward flow so that we don't really we sort of discuss them after the fact, but they're brought to us by Sabrina, and that's her job, because some things do need the board approval. A lot of things need board approval. And I see nothing wrong with that, the way it is these days.
Yeah, it's not a question of do you see something wrong. I was just noticing that we had a bit of a 50-50 split between agree and strongly agree, and just wondered if there was some specific feedback we wanted to offer that dealt with the question of type and level of detail. So it's just an open question. I personally don't feel that there's anything that would needs to be changed, but I think it's an opportunity to open up to everybody else if they wish to comment. And seeing none, I would like to move on to the next item on this agenda, on this committee agenda, and that has to do with the standing committees. So to put the discussion on the table, I would like to move that the board approve that no standing committees be appointed until further notice. Looking for a seconder before opening to discussion. Joanne. So, discussion, please.
I'm not terribly comfortable with the words "until further notice."
Mm-hmm.
Can we set a time limit after which it can be reconsidered?
Do you want to make it?
Excuse me, what about at this time? Or is that, you want something more of a limit than that, Jesse?
I'm thinking about the next board year and how we don't know who will be on the board between now and then. Presumably maybe the same board, or it may not be. But I'm thinking that maybe this is well, Lori could comment on this, on my comment, and that is this something which is usual or unusual in your world? In my world, it's unusual.
To not have committees.
Yes.
I would say in the library world, you would generally see committees. In my own personal world, working at Southern Ontario Library Service, we did everything as a full board. But it did make for longer full board meetings. And you were running good portions of the meeting more like a committee meeting, obviously, and sometimes a bit as a workshop. So it did change the nature of the board meetings quite a bit.
As far as anybody knows, has there ever been a period of time in the history of our library board where it has functioned without committees?
Sabrina, would you have any information?
There were not regular committees until I came.
Oh, that's interesting.
There were some ad hoc
correct, yeah.
committees that were brought in and out, but that was one of the first things that we did was we broke into committees based on the strategic plan.
That's correct. Prior to the strategic plan, we didn't do anything with committees other than ad hoc, for instance.
I have a possible rewrite, Lori, that we could do so that this board approve that. Sorry, I wrote it and then I lost my train of thought there. 1 second.
Well, just while you're working on that, I just was going to suggest instead of saying until further notice, simply saying for 2021.
Right.
If I may interject there, why don't you just put a period after the word appointed? Recommends that no standing committees be appointed, period.
Well, we don't want this to be indefinite.
Well, you see, subsequently, other boards, other members can bring it up and change that again to appoint a standing committee.
Well, let me do a quick question to everybody. Would you like to see it specified for, let's say, the next year? Or just leave it completely open-ended?
I'd like to see how it works without committee before committing indefinitely.
Thank you. Okay. Joanne?
I want to hear what Sabrina had to suggest for wording.
So my alteration was around the year, so that this board approved that no standing committees be appointed for 2021, and that this may be reviewed at any board meeting. So November of 21, it's still slated that we are appointing committees, because it happens every November. But at any board meeting, when we're looking at how our no committee structure is working, if we feel it's not working for us, then we could give notice at that meeting that at the next meeting, we're going to appoint committees.
How do you think that this, Sabrina, how do you think that this is likely to affect the duration on average of board meetings?
I think that the board meeting will be slightly longer because there is work and discussion that happens at the committee level. But as a overall time commitment, I don't know that it would be much different because members are already participating in those committees. And if there's anything that's a big discussion that we know we have to hit as a single main topic that at committee might have taken, 2 hours, we can always establish a special meeting where we have a single agenda item that we work through that piece. It still is a board meeting. It would just be a special board meeting for that one agenda item.
Or, Madam Chair, if I may ask a question, could we also appoint an ad hoc committee if we felt it needed that kind of attention?
Yes, we could.
Yeah.
And the ad hoc committees will not be adjusted by this because we do have one current ad hoc committee that will continue.
But if we wanted to hold a fundraising dance, for example, we don't want to go into all the details of that at a board meeting. So we might appoint an ad hoc committee to organize that. Am I right about that?
Yes.
Yes, I agree.
Yes. So I was polling everybody just briefly to see what they thought in terms of specifying a length of time. And Sabrina added for 2021 and may be reviewed at any board meeting. So are people comfortable with that adjustment? And Joanne, you were the seconder on that motion.
I like Sabrina's wording. It gives us some flexibility.
Okay, so right now the wording is that this board approve that no standing committees be appointed for 2021 and may be reviewed at any board meeting. Any other comments or questions? In which case I'll call the question. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Okay, that's carried. The last item on this committee report is to do with the holiday policy. So I would like to move that the board approve, sorry, the BMPL holidays for 2021 and looking for a seconder.
I'll second that.
That's Rob. Sabrina, did you want to comment at all on this?
So this is a policy that we have. We don't actually have to review the policy annually, but we do have to review annually in November the holidays so that we are just approving that the holiday structure is continuing forward. We do, for the most part, look at the town's policies for their holidays as well and try to keep them similar so that there is no difference between what a town staff and what a library employee is receiving. So we do work closely to make sure those are similar. So this will match up with the current policy at the town and predominantly our federal provincial holidays as well as some board designated holidays.
Great. Any questions or comments? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Okay,
Yes.
great. And that concludes this committee's report. I believe.
Karina, can we move over to you then?
We can.
Starting with G3, I guess.
Yep, we have the communications report. Dorothy has sent her regrets, so I can just put this forward. The committee did review the action plan. They have a few outstanding items, most of which they're looking at doing some version of that between now and the end of the year. One of the things that was in our action plan was C27, which was to hold at least 3 town hall meetings. The original plan for 3 was that we wanted to be able to move around the community, so we would hit both the east and the west end, as well as the more rural areas. So it was going to be Ellie Shore, another one in Craigleith, and another one at Ravenna Hall. Obviously, we've moved to have our first 2 being virtual, and it didn't feel that there was a third one that was really needed, given that they are virtual at this point and there's no pressing matters between now and the end of the year. So at this point, we'll just be dropping that third one to only hold the 2. And if there were any questions on the report, I'm able to answer questions, and then Lori also is a member of that committee. If not, Mr. Chair, we'll move on.
Yeah, yes, of course. I'm sorry. I was looking at something here. Yeah, go ahead. Service
So
excellence.
the next report is service excellence. Unless anyone has specific questions, I'll just highlight 2 things that we've done recently that we were really happy to participate with. And both of them certainly would be what you would consider to be outside of library experiences. The drive-through trick-or-treat, as well as our participation as the live broadcast of the Remembrance Day Services. Public libraries, as we know, are community hubs. And as a community hub, in a time when our facilities are limited for access, we saw both the Halloween drive-through and the ability to live broadcast the Remembrance Day services so people could participate without attending as really still filling that mandate of being a community hub for our community. So that was why we did those 2 pretty large events. The Remembrance Day service had quite a number of people who participated. There were 200 people who viewed the services live on the day at the time and a few hours afterwards. If you went and watched it once and came back and watched it later, you'll notice they're different. We did some minor edits on them to try to clean things up from the live stream. And since we've done that, by reloading those new films, as opposed to it being the original live stream, the numbers were deleted and changed again. We had an additional 118 people who watched it after that post-production happened. So in all, and this was at the time of the report a week ago, so all in all, we had 318 people who watched in our community the 2 sites. The town rebroadcast that by putting a link back to our YouTube so that they could promote it on the town's website, and I think that was very successful. The Halloween drive-through was something that we simply asked the community, if you are uncomfortable opening your doors for trick-or-treaters, which was something that they were saying was, not advised, we asked them to simply contribute the candy that they would have purchased anyways, and we did a drive-through. So there were 62 cars that came through, over 300 participants. We assume that next year we may be looking at a very similar thing. This is not something we look to do as an annual event, but it was very successful, and the people that came through really thanked us for giving their families and their children an opportunity to celebrate in a public way that was fully safe and contact traced. So unless there's other questions about the report, I'll leave it at those 2.
Thank you. Now you may keep going with action plan updates.
So our action plan updates, we are getting very close to completing. We only have a month and a half left. We're currently at 87.5% of the items we agreed to continue after COVID. If you remember, we had 108 items originally. We dropped it down to 80. So we did drop about 28 numbers, but those were things that were either a case that we couldn't successfully do it during COVID, we couldn't safely do it during COVID, or the money that had originally been earmarked and in some cases approved had been clawed back because of the COVID overages, either because the town asked us to rethink budgeting, asked everybody to rethink budgeting, or I had to look at our internal budget and make decisions so that we could keep purchasing PPE. So that is why we have those 28 not even included in our numbers, because we just sunset those until the next year. So we are at 87.5% completed. We do expect to have just about everything done by the end of the year. And again, if there's any questions specifically on an item, we can look at those directly.
Any questions?
I have a couple. Just under OC1, 1.4 is about the fall trustee council meetings. And I know that the group that we normally participate in was last weekend, and we missed it, I guess, partly because we didn't have an October meeting. But there is still 3 that are scheduled this coming Saturday morning as a Zoom call. And not normally our area, but I'm wondering if it's worth somebody participating just to learn a little bit more about the concept of the board assemblies.
The board assemblies, I'm sorry, Laurie, what are board assemblies?
That's the information from Souls and OLS North about their new governance structure. And I think it may be replacing, probably it's replacing the trustee councils in future. So just have a bit more information about that. It's a Zoom call that runs Saturday morning from 9:30 to noon.
Do we need a motion to authorize someone to attend that?
I don't know if you actually need a motion since there's no expenses attached to it. It's a matter of
Okay.
signing into the Zoom call. I'm just
Okay.
wondering if maybe one of us should participate just so we have the information firsthand. And I'd be prepared to do that if no one else wants to.
Well, you'd probably say hello to a lot of old friends, wouldn't you?
Well, no, because this is going to be the group that's based around Oshawa and it's board, so it's not staff level. So it wouldn't be people I would normally have known.
Oh.
Well, I would be fine with that if I think you're probably the best suited person.
Okay, well, I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
The other item is 1.6, and I just didn't know if we should be looking at who might be interested in participating in the boot camp, since we probably don't have a December meeting when this is expected to normally be identified.
The schedule for OLA is very close to being published. I know I've received a few of the schedules yesterday. So I'm assuming, I was hoping it would be out for today so I at least knew what the plan was, but I believe it will be released within the week.
And do we know the dates of the boot camp this year?
It should still be the Saturday, but they've pushed everything back to the first week of February.
Is that in fact all Zoom?
It will be, yes. It will be some version of electronic meetings. This is something that I can send the information around to the entire board by email, and anybody who is interested can respond. We do have to pay the fees for this, so maybe on this one, we would like to set an upset number of attendees, unless people are comfortable in committing to attend without seeing what the agenda is.
Sabrina, if I may, you will have the agenda fairly shortly, and if you could send it around to all the board members, you get an indication of who might be interested at that time in sitting in on the meeting or attending the meetings. Isn't that okay?
Who's attending is fine to do by email, but since we do have to spend money on it, we do need to have a resolution that is approving attendees. Even if we don't give names, we can approve, 2 members, 3 members, 5 members. You let me know what you want to do and we can move forward from that. So if
Ballpark,
there's
what are we
anybody
talking
who's
about?
interested in attending, just so we have sort of a knowledge of how many would like to
What are we
attend
talking
might be
about
helpful.
money-wise?
I have not received any of the promotional material, so I can't say.
Are we
but
talking
it's-
$5 or $500
It's usually about $250
per person?
per person. I'm assuming it's going to be a little bit less this year. They were trying to bring costs down a bit. So in our budget, we usually send 2 to 3 people at $250 plus. Occasionally we have, we always have travel on that as well. So I think that we can easily do the same number of 3 members. We could probably stretch it to 4 members since it'll be less this year and no travel.
And this would be looking in on a virtual meeting?
It would be basically a one-day conference, yes.
But virtually?
Yes,
And the charge for that's $250?
it will probably be similar to that. I have not seen the pricing.
Well,
That's what it was last year.
yeah, okay, I understand. Well, I must remember where I am. Lori, do you have thought on that?
Well, only Sabrina's asking for a motion, so we could, approve up to, 3 people participate in the boot camp.
Then you'd have to put a top limit on the dollar spent.
Well, it won't be more than what we usually budget for. So I think if we're just saying the numbers, we're fine.
Would it help if we just said up to $750?
Would help me.
Okay.
Yeah, and then that way, if it comes in and they say, well, it's only going to be $175, well, then we can afford 4 people. But otherwise,
That's right. And if they all of a sudden want to charge $300 a person, then nobody
Yeah.
can go.
Yeah.
Or 2 people.
So
yeah.
maybe eliminate the number of people and just simply say that we approve up to $750 being spent on reps to participate in the OLB8 boot camp.
yes, I would go along with that one.
I like that, yeah.
So I don't mind moving that.
I'll second it.
Well, I guess we're still here? Yeah. All in favor? Okay, that's carried.
Were there any other questions on the current action plan?
That's what I was looking for, yeah. I have no other questions. Can we move on to the item G6? CEO evaluation. Laurie, back to you. No, Dorothy, pardon me, is the chair.
So Lori may want to handle this one in Dorothy's absence.
But yeah, sure.
Okay.
It just feels wrong for me to talk about my own evaluation.
Right, good point, good point. So I'm just doing a quick mental review here. So we've already received the report. So it was really just to let you know that we did complete the Survey Monkey with the 2 partners we had identified to provide input. And so our next stage is to incorporate that into the actual evaluation and using the form that we have used traditionally in the past, well, certainly in the last year. And just a refresher to the board, we had already appointed the committee, this ad hoc committee, to complete the actual evaluation with Sabrina. So that means Dorothy Morris and I will be doing that. And as part of that, we will be bringing into her evaluation the feedback from the partners surveyed.
Thank you. Thank you. I think are we finished with that particular subject?
We are?
Thank you. We'll move on to item H.
So if we can, Mr. Chair, we need to bounce back to F1, which is to go back to our action plan 2021 now that we have determined not to appoint committee members for this year at this point, and then we can approve the action plan as amended.
Oh, okay. Thank you for keeping me right.
So I do have a few items that will be added in to our action plan. We have the initiate consultation process for the new strategic plan. We have to have the meeting between council and the board to discuss the priorities for the next 12 to 18 months. And we will make sure that we also have the quarterly meetings with the board chair, vice chair, CEO to meet with the mayor, deputy chair, deputy mayor, and CAO. And then we also mentioned that any mention of those committees, which were highlighted in red, will fall off of that. So it's just a board mandate at this time.
Okay, what else? Nothing else we have to do on that subject?
Nope, just approve.
Well, then we need a motion, to make that as one motion, I think.
I'll just list it as amended, but just so you know what the amendments are.
Okay. Could I have someone to make that motion?
I will move it.
Rob, seconder.
Second.
All in favor of it as amended and carried? Against, sorry. Was that against, Lori?
No, just me being a bit slow.
You're waving your hand. That's carried. Okay, Sabrina, where are we now?
So we're now moving on to section H.
Section H, okay. Tell me about the 25th anniversary and what a biblio board is.
So the 25th anniversary is not as we anticipated, although nothing in 2020 is as we would have anticipated. If you recall, 2020 was going to be a 25th anniversary year throughout the whole year. We had a number of events planned, including a gala that was going to take place in December. We opted to scale that back. First of all, meeting is difficult. Fundraising is difficult when people are struggling. There have been some fundraising efforts that have been done online, but we opted just to really stick with the month of December at this point. So it'll be a bit more of a subdued anniversary, but we'll be doing some decorations in the library. We also have our e-newsletter, which will be having the history of the Blue Mountains Public Library, how we've changed over the 25 years, mention of who has been on boards and CEOs and things like that. There's also a biblio board, which is a virtual collection through the museum, and the link is there. It's on the man, Leonard E. Shore. We're also pulling together the history of libraries in what is now the town of Blue Mountains. We have had quite a history of libraries over the 100 years of the area that is now the municipality. That have ranged from, the ones that people think of as, pre-L.E. Shore, right back into the 18 and 1900s. So very exciting to be able to see some of those bits of information. So we'll be publishing our e-newsletter and certainly visit our biblio boards and other links that we have, and know that it'll be a bit of a different anniversary than what we had thought, but I think it's enough to let the community know that we're here, we're strong, we've changed, we've adapted, and we continue to change and adapt and be the community home.
Thank you for that information. Okay, can we move on to the item on the screen, the workplace safety plan?
So this is the addition to the agenda that I brought forward this afternoon. The province earlier in the week has mandated that all workplaces to remain open must have a COVID-19 workplace safety plan. They've given templates, and really it's everything that we've already done. So instead of repackaging things in new names, all that I'm asking is for the resolution that this board acknowledge that the Blue Mountains Public Library current policies and plans make up the BMPL COVID-19 Workplace Safety Plan required for all workplaces by the province. The safety plan includes the following approved policies and plans, and you can see there are a number of them there. So our pandemic plan, our working from home during COVID-19, which really differentiates between teleworking, which has an obligation on the employer, from us allowing people in a lesser hour situation to do some work at home. Most of our staff right now are not doing that, but as we know, tomorrow the province may or may not be talking about lockdowns again. We'll see what happens in tomorrow's notice. Other items that are in there is our pandemic plan, the Ellie Shore opening plan, the Craigleith Heritage Depot's reopening plan, working in the time of COVID cleaning procedures, handling of materials, which is talking about how to properly handle contaminated materials and our decontamination process, and the use of PPE, those are all plans. And then we also have appendices of 3 of the PSHSA, which is the Public Safety, the Public Service Health and Safety Association, that have to do with COVID. The first is the library, the second is for museums, and the third is what a health and safety committee needs to do. So we have gone beyond what they require, and this really is just for us to acknowledge that if we were ever requested by the ministry, we acknowledge that those items put together as one packet make up this requirement.
Thank you. Okay, it seems fairly straightforward. It seemed straightforward to me and still does. Would someone care to make that particular motion that Sabrina has suggested, that this board acknowledge that the Blue Mountains, etc.? Jesse, okay, a seconder? May I, Laurie,
See,
thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. I saw Joanne's hand.
That's, oh, see, I can't, so I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. All in favor? Please raise your hand or speak.
Yes.
Thank you. I guess that's carried. I'm working a little blind this afternoon, but that's okay.
It's hard when you share the screen. You don't get to see all of the faces.
I know. I know. All right, moving on to item I, roundtable. Does anyone have anything to contribute to this roundtable discussion? Hearing none, nothing, and I have nothing to contribute. Let's move on to key messages. And where are they? There we are. Key messages. Were you going to put that on the screen?
I am. Just
Sabrina?
1 second while I get it.
So, yeah. Messages, I see them. Thank you. I'm not going to read those, but everyone has read them, I assume. Does anyone have anything to add to these key messages or possibly suggest deletions or changes or whatever?
I assume the 2021 standing committees will be altered or removed. Oh, I see. Yeah, that's right. It did say that. Okay.
I have a couple of things. Let's wait till you finish there, Sabrina. This is tiny. At the very top of the page we're looking at, it says Craigleith Heritage Depot now blank for museum services. So that would be now open, I presume.
Oh, yeah, you're right, yes.
Mhm.
As a statement, yes.
Yes, no,
The depot is now open for routine services.
Oh, thank you.
Lori. Anything else?
Me, of course, I always do, you know me, Morris. Again, this is another tiny one just because we're going down. Under service excellent, our military heritage just has remembrance. The very last line spelled incorrectly. That's right.
Yeah, that's not right.
Then I wondered,
Needs an N after the A as well. Yes. There we go.
That's good.
What word was it before that it didn't come up as wrong?
I don't know.
I don't know. Re-embrace. That's what it said.
Yeah, re-embrace, I
No,
think it
that's when
was,
you
yeah.
type it, it auto corrects because you're so off.
I wonder if we ought to be noting 3 different things on this that aren't here at the moment. A reference to the action plan 2020 and where we ended up in terms of completion.
The 87.5%, you mean?
I think maybe whatever the number ends up being.
Usually we do that in January because we've completed the full action plan, but we can certainly do it that we're on target for completion.
I'm easy either way. And
Your key actions, you decide what you would like.
well, we can wait until January. I think that's probably a good idea. Then the year is over for 2020. But I agree we should have 2021 on here that we've approved a new plan for the new fiscal year. And that will be posted, I presume.
Yeah, and the public can access it somehow.
Yeah. The next one, I wondered about talking about the budget and saying something along the lines of that the board reviewed the Q3 financials. Expenses reflect a number of shifts to address COVID requirements such as PPE, as well as an effort to reduce discretionary spending to assist the town in its larger COVID response. The library also made good use of federal grants for a variety of projects, adding 7 temporary staff over the summer.
Sounds fine to me, Lori, but is there not too much detail in there? Perhaps too much detail?
I don't,
It fits with the length of others.
yeah, I thought it hit on the 2 main things was that we've had to shift our budget because of COVID, and also we're trying to support this town in its larger efforts. And on the other hand, we did a really good job in getting federal grants to help us move ahead with other projects at the same time.
Okay, Lori, you got me convinced.
Are we certain of the number of positions for next summer? The 7?
This was last summer.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misheard that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm open to different wording, but that's sort of the
No,
gist
no,
of the
that's
message.
fine. I just wanted to make sure we weren't sort of ahead.
Okay, and I don't know, Sabrina, if you want me to say that more slowly, or I can
You
just.
can either say it to me or you can send it to me and I will pop that in.
Okay, is the rest of the board okay if I just send it to Sabrina later?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, that's fine.
Okay. I didn't know if we should mention anything about the board evaluation. The board conducted its annual evaluation, and I don't know, I thought,
And we done good.
I might go a little bit
Very
beyond
well
that.
said, Joanne.
See,
I
we do
was
have
going to
fun.
say we patted ourselves in the back.
Yeah.
Well, Sabrina's off and running here as usual.
No, yeah.
Well, maybe we can say, added an item to the 2021 action plan to hold a meeting with council and board to discuss priorities over 12 to 18 months. Or something, maybe not that specific. And there were a couple of other, no, that was the one that came out of that meeting.
I wonder if we need to just stop at action plan 2021.
Yeah,
Develop priorities for inclusion in the action plan. We don't need the 4 areas of focus.
Okay,
yeah.
That's good.
that works for me.
Okay.
Hey,
Yeah.
thank you, Laurie. You always do a good job on this particular aspect.
If I could add one thing under the mass, under that next one, the town bylaw will be coming up next week. So I wonder if we should just leave the wording so that, because it will add to the provincial bylaw, that it isn't just the person who is in charge of the building, but the person entering the building who will be responsible for wearing a mask. So it's going to be in the town bylaw, it will be on both, the onus will be on both parties. Right
wear a
now, the
mask, yeah.
provincial bylaw only requires the person in charge of the facility to require people entering to wear a mask. The town bylaw will say that you must wear a mask when you're entering a store. We can be more restrictive. We can't be more open. ONUS, provincial.
Onus.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. That's a good point. Good idea.
Yeah,
Sure.
we're going to want to get the word out to people, so
Individual.
this would be a good way to do it.
And I added this in here in part because the town is doing the bylaw review right now, but we have been relatively vocal on what's been happening here in the library. We've actually had one individual who was refused access to the building file a bylaw complaint against us. And we will continue to uphold the fact that if you come in without a mask and do not specifically state that you have a medical exemption, we will refuse service. We had one person who did have a medical condition who asked for a type of service that we also refused. So coming in and browsing without a mask is one thing, but if you have a medical condition and you then want to have tech help, but you're not willing to put on a mask to protect the staff that you are going to be sitting within 6 inches from a health and safety standard, we can't do that. So in those cases, we are offering other ways of doing things like tech help. It can be on a Zoom call where we're all safe. We offer a face shield, which helps but does not meet the legal requirement of a mask, but it is definitely better than nothing. And most people have been very gracious, either the ones coming in who wear a mask, or even the people who have medical needs who understand how important it is and either do their best to wear a mask or won't ask for that type of service. But those that have come in with a political statement to be made, even if they then state that they are, medically impacted by a mask, if you say it's a political statement, you will be asked to leave, and we do have the right to call the police. Because as Rob said, it's on us. Currently, it's not on them. So they can stand up and make a political statement. We need to protect our staff and our other members who are in the community who visit.
And we may see a lot more of this because the numbers are growing. We had 17 new cases in Grey Bruce yesterday. So our happy little haven is changing.
Yes, and the word is that we may be moving to yellow within the next day.
Okay, moving on, if I may. Key messages. Everyone happy so far? May I have someone move that we approve the release of the key messages in our November letter? Someone to move?
I'll move that.
Rob?
I actually saw Lori's hand up first, so I'll second it.
Whatever. Either way, whatever you want, Sabrina. But it done. All in favor? Thank you. Carried. We have no closed meeting necessary. We're very open in these board meetings. And before I turn the gavel over to Sabrina, the imaginary gavel, don't you find that we can conduct forget about the committee meetings. We can do things as a board. It's not that bad, and it's only what 4 o'clock now. We're not much further behind, and we've discussed a lot of stuff today. Anyway, going on. We come to the election of the chairs for and vice chair later for the thing, because this is the end of my term as chair. So Sabrina, would you mind doing the necessary?
Certainly. So our action plan, our annual action plan states that every November, we will have the election for our board chair and our board vice chair. So I will start the election first for our chair and ask if anybody would like to make a nomination. Lori?
I'd like to nominate Morris for chair.
Okay, and are there any other nominations? Just trying to scroll through my names here. Seeing none at this time. Morris, do you accept the nomination?
Yes, I will accept the nomination. Shouldn't we have a seconder?
Don't need one.
Well, I was raising my hand to second the nomination, but
I don't.
So Rob seconds.
Required.
So we have Morris does accept the nomination. We have Lori and Rob who have moved and seconded. Do we have any other nominations? Going twice, going 3 times. So I will note that this board has elected Morris Pepper as the chair of the board, effective immediately and expiring at the conclusion of the November 21 board meeting or at the next election, whichever should occur first. So congratulations, Morris.
Thank you, and thank you for your votes of confidence. I'll try to keep the meetings short.
Not if it's all the committee stuff.
All right, so having our first election acclaimed, we now move into our vice chair. And again, I will ask if there is anyone who would like to nominate.
I'll nominate Lori Gillies.
I will
And Rob
certainly
is
second that.
nominating
Second.
Lori.
My second.
Jesse is seconding that. And I think Morris is thirding that. Lori, do you accept the nomination?
Yep.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? I'm just scrolling through my little faces here to make sure. Going once, going twice, and we have a second to claim, so that this board elect Lori Gillies as the Blue Mountains Public Library Vice Chair of the Board, effective immediately and expiring at the conclusion of the November 2021 board meeting or at the next election, whichever should occur first. So congratulations to our 2021 chair and vice chair, and I will turn it over to Morris Pepper, our incoming chair.
Thank you, Sabrina. Well, that was fast. Okay, I guess we've pretty well come to the end of our meeting today, other than we have a notice of various meetings coming up, which will be in January. As Laurie mentioned, we don't normally have a meeting in December.
So December is not one we typically have unless the board feels it's needed. I don't believe that there's any pressing business either at a former committee level or for the board to warrant bringing you together on the holiday season. That said, we'll see what happens in the next 4 weeks. If anything is required from a operational need, certainly we can always call a special meeting for a single topic. It wouldn't be a standing board meeting.
Good, thank you. So our next meeting is in January. As I say, we don't have any other committee meetings. And that's it.
So the CEO Evaluation Committee will still stand, which is January 5th. They are an ad
Oh,
hoc
yes.
committee. But then all of the tentatively scheduled and dependent on G2 will all fall off.
Okay, is everyone happy?
Yeah, and my phone is even still holding out because it still has the gala for December 5th. So I just noticed that the other day. But in the meantime, everyone have a wonderful Christmas, as good as you can have this year.
Thank you, Rob. And okay, with that, at 4:08, I declare this meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
So
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Morris. Good meeting.
Yes.
Thank
Not
you.
too long, huh?
No.
Even though I do sometimes give grief, I mean nothing personal. So thank you for what you do.